So they've been moved to San Diego, and a lot of teachers are volunteering to go to these places and teach these migrant children. Still don't want to teach the American children, but they're cool with, going to these overflow facilities. I want to bring on Libby Emmons. You guys know she's a frequent guest of the show. She writes for the Post Millennial, and the Post Millennial they come up with this stuff. There's so many stories every day that they hit first. Libby, thank you for joining the program.
Sure thing. Thanks, Grace.
So, Libby, let's talk a little bit about this story, because when I first saw it, actually, my dad called me this morning and he said, "You hear about this story in San Diego? The migrant children are getting in-person learning." And I said out loud to my dad, I said, "I'm going to have to double check that. That sounds like fake news." And it's not.
Yeah, I had a very similar reaction. I saw last night as well. I was looking at it. I saw something on Twitter. Someone was like, "Oh, so illegal immigrant children are going to be getting in-person education in San Diego. San Diego kids are still stuck in remote learning hell." And I was like, oh, my goodness. So I sent it to one of my writers working last night, Katie Davis-Court, and I asked her to check it out. And sure enough, that's what's going on. So in San Diego, they have children housed at migrant facilities, seems like detention to me. And they are going to be receiving, per HHS and the Biden administration's largesse, in-person learning. Teachers from San Diego have been asked if they wanted to come in and volunteer to teach these kids, and undoubtedly many with giant big hearts will go do that. But what's shocking to me is that the San Diego Teachers Union has not permitted teachers to go back into the classroom to teach the kids of California. And
Libby, I think it just highlights the hypocrisy and the disconnect between what regular people are worried about on a daily basis versus what we're being told is the real problem. And I think that the border really highlights it the best, because you have people who are walking around every day being told by Karens in their workplace that they have to have 2 masks on or have their mask up higher. And then meanwhile, they're seeing these pictures that, first of all, reporters have to sneak these photos from the border because there's no press allowed in. But they're seeing these photos and they're going, wait a second. So we have all these people coming in with God knows what diseases. I mean, let's just be honest. They probably have COVID. They probably have a lot of things. And that's fine, but my kid can't go back to school. I mean, am I simplifying it, or is that kind of the crux of the issue here?
No, I think that's entirely the crux of the issue. In fact, just before we got on the call, the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki took a question about this, and the reporter was sort of aghast, like, why is it that San Diego kids can't get properly educated, but these kids that you have invited up into the country for no apparent reason can? And Jen Psaki was like, oh, well, it's spring break. Context is important. Kids are going to go back to school in San Diego on April 12th, which is the date. But I think that context is important. And the real context is that these kids have been kept out of school for a year. The education they've been receiving is garbage. Remote learning is not learning. It is sitting on a screen on mute for half the day. And the teachers' unions have refused to allow kids to get educated, but now they're encouraging other kids to get educated. It doesn't make any sense. And I guarantee you that these kids at the San Diego migrant facility are not going to be learning about critical race theory or the racial scourge of the evil United States either. That's probably not what's going to be getting taught here. So what is really going on? Why are we preferencing these kids who, are very deserving of all the wonderful things in the world, but so are the children of California, and they're not getting it.
Right. I'm speaking with Libby Emmons from the Post Millennial. She also writes for The Federalist. And Libby, I know I ask you this a lot when you come on, but I know you have kids at home. I know they're trying to learn the best they can. And I know it's frustrating because you have a career and you're trying to get your work done. And so I have to get your reaction. I want to play this cut from our vice president and then get your reaction, not only as someone who follows this, but as a mom. This is cut one.
More parents are seeing the value of educators when they had to bring their kids and say, we're not paying them nearly enough.
What do you have to say about that, Libby?
I don't understand why the vice president chooses to cackle like an insane person half the time, but I found that also rather shocking and frustrating that she's talking about, the full clip of that was that she was talking about how essential it is that we use this opportunity of the crisis to basically push forward a massive funding proposal for universal child care and all of this stuff, which I also just think is so harmful. You know, there's this giant push to make sure that mothers don't take care of their children, but that the government does it. And I'm not a huge fan of that for, for like preschool age kids and whatever else. You know, that's my own bias, I'm sure. But I found it really upsetting to see the callous laughter that she employed with regard to parents' struggle this year. It's upsetting.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they just really don't care about what regular Americans are going through and the restrictions that we've all been put under and the really debilitating impact of this on our children. And this whole thing that they have about, all the schools are going to be open by, April 23rd, I think is the 100 days mark into office. But what they're not telling you is that the remote learning option that will still be available means that the kids that are in the classroom are not actually being taught by teachers in the classroom. They are still required to use the online tools. So when my son, for example, goes into school and there's however many kids in his class in person, all of those kids are sitting there with their remote learning devices in order to facilitate the remote learning of the kids at home. So the teachers are at their desks. You still have to raise your hand on the screen, not in person. You still have to communicate with your teacher through screen, even though you're sitting 6 feet away at your own desk. So it's not, it's still bad. It's still not what we're looking for, and it's still not what parents are demanding.
And I think another point that I really hadn't thought of until you just pointed it out, but she's using what's happened over the last year to say, I think we all realize that teachers need to be paid more and they deserve more money. And once again, I think there's a disconnect because I think that regular Americans, what their takeaway is from this last year is we need to get rid of teachers' unions because these people have way too much power.
Yeah, I think interesting too. And I think we saw that also in the campaign season. So the National Education Association, which is not only the biggest teachers union in the country, but I believe is the biggest union in the country with almost 3 million members. They gave a lot of money to the Biden campaign, and shortly after the election, they sent their playbook for how money should be spent on education, for how to get schools open. And it had a huge amount of things in it that had nothing to do with, COVID, blah, blah, blah. It had to do with the kind of education they wanted. It had to do with different kinds of curriculum. It had to do with LGBTQ course study work and all of these extra things. It also had some things in it that a lot of parents want, smaller class sizes and more attention for each kid. But their, I think, $165 billion proposal, much of which got through in that $1.9 trillion package, was really an awful lot more about what teachers' unions want than it was either what parents want, what students need, or what teachers want.
Right. And then just to piggyback off that for a second here, and we don't have a ton of time left, Libby, but you have a story out today where there's it looks like a Zoom call. It's, how school is nowadays. And there's a student on one side of it and the teacher on the other. And the teacher shows a picture of, I think it's 2 women. I don't have the photo in front of me, but one is black and one is white. And the teacher says to the student, "Can you tell me what you see when you look at this photo?" And the student keeps saying, "I see 2 people." And the teacher becomes obsessed with, "No, what do you really see?" And the kid's like, "I see 2 people. What do you want me to say?" And there is this obsession with race. And it seems like even if they are back in school, I think it's probably a little frightening for parents now to know what they're being taught when the Zoom is off.
Yeah, I actually thought that was a really interesting video, and it was an interesting Zoom call. And what I really appreciated about it was the student's refusal to back down. The student was actually anti-racist. the teacher was demanding that the student look at everything through a lens of race, and the student was saying, no, absolutely, I will not. And I have the utmost respect for that, and I hope that that's the kind of courage that our kids can have to say, no, equality under the law is real. There are not differences between people that have to do, qualitative differences that have to do with skin color, or that are based in skin color or bloodline or anything like that. No one is better than anyone else because of where they come from. No one is worse. How did we possibly get so far into the weeds that we have teachers demanding that children look at a person and judge them by the color of their skin before the content of their character? We have had, my son was actually asking me about this morning because I was watching the video and he was like, what's that? And I talked to him about it. And he was like, why is this going on? And I was like, well, we had this beautiful civil rights movement, absolutely unprecedented in the history of the world. I mean, spectacular civil rights leaders, amazing thinkers. We had leaders at the time who were like, oh, let me listen up and see what that's about. Yeah, you're actually right. And we have this, and now we're just reversing course. Yeah. We're betraying everything the nation stands for, and we're betraying everything the civil rights movement taught us.
I agree,
for
Libby.
Someone like me, it's shocking.
I agree, Libby, and I think that's a great point. And I think we have to end it there. We don't have a lot of time. But, Libby, if people want to follow you on Twitter and find your work, where can they find you?
I'm at Libby Emmons on Twitter, and, of course, I'm at thepostmillennial.com every day.
All right, awesome. Everyone should check out that website. By the way, guys, the Biden administration's policies and executive orders are already causing some economic disturbance. Tax laws are going to change. You've heard Joe talk about that. Your tax burden on selling real estate will grow. Don't get caught flat-footed and squander the equity in your real estate built up over years or even decades. Sell today with J.J. Manning. For over 40 years, J.J. Manning has been the leading auction house in New England. From high-end homes to estates to commercial properties throughout New England, J.J. Manning can get your property sold fast and contingency-free. That's the key. There is a big reason why Mass Lawyers Weekly voted J.J. Manning #1 for 4 consecutive years in a row, because they have a huge following of bidders who pay cash. When you sell with a broker, you pay the commission, but in an auction, the buyer pays. These are treacherous times in the real estate market. You know this. Some sectors are at an all-time high. Some are losing ground. You want to act now before Joe Biden destroys yet another sector of the economy, before you're able to cash out. To learn more on how to get your property sold fast, contact Charlie Gill at jjmanning.com. With over 16,000 sales and satisfied clients, you can be the next one. Call them today at 1-800-521-0111 or go to jjmanning.com and get your property sold. We'll be back on the other side. This is The Grace Curley Show.
The Grace Curley Show will be right back.